Well, jeepers! You're listening to Smash or Pass.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another interview on the JayBee and Milly channel. I am JayBee and joining me is Sophie.
Hey.
We have Alycia, and joining us as our special guest who will be interviewing today, we have the incredible Mr. John Bruno. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
Well, it's such an honor, and I kind of want to speak about your career, I suppose starting from the very beginning, but of course, you've had such an amazing and long career that there's just so much to unpack, so I hope that I can streamline it enough with, we're also going into some detail, and I guess, through researching, one of the first places that I did visit was IMDb, and there it told me that your first kind of roles within, I guess, the filmmaking, TV show making industry was in 1970 as an assistant animator. So was that the goal of you eventually, at least at that stage, becoming an animator?
Well, I'm from, you probably don't, you guys are in London, but in where I grew up, south of San Francisco, there's the Monterey Peninsula, and in Monterey and Carmel Valley, Pebble Beach area. That's where a lot of comic book artists, comic strip artists lived and worked. They worked from their home. And when I was a little kid, my mother would bring me to these little sort of events that had the local cartoonists. There was Hank Ketchum, Gus Arriola, who did a thing called Gordo. Ketchum did Dennis the Menace. Eldon Dedini was a New Yorker Playboy cartoonist who was sort of very sophisticated. And Lee Holly. A lot of these guys worked. The big daddy in the room, other than Charles Schultz, was Hank Ketchum. He had Dennis the Menace. Dennis the Menace had a TV show. But all these comic strips were in the local paper. And I thought it was just all these guys worked locally. I didn't know. I was 12, and I could go see them. And then the work would end up in the local paper, and the Sunday paper. And I just thought it was local. Never had any idea it was international. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a cartoonist, an illustrator. So I used to draw. And then, but as far as animation, that there was the Disney Channel. It was the Mickey Mouse Club, I think. And they ran all this really old material, but I didn't know it was old. But Mickey Mouse, Brave Little Tailor, really that squash and stretch, really well drawn animation. Then there was, of course, the Disney movies, Snow White, Pinocchio. And that just got me into it. And I was drawing. So the drawing part of it, I was always interested in. And it's something I could actually do. I never thought about it. I drew all the time. Did I over answer your question?
Oh no, honestly, you've done so much, and I don't think there's enough time in one session to get it all in. So as much as you can tell us is absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. It's just
that's what got me into it, and but it was I liked all the Disney work initially. And I think the first stuff then that came onto television was artwork from things from Hanna-Barbera. And I like the Flintstones and Flintstones, the Jetsons, Yogi Bear, that kind of stuff. And that was sort of everybody, all my friends, we always talked about that. But I would draw, and I wanted to do animation. And then one day, I had a relative who in San Francisco who had they had a film distribution company. They had some theaters. They said, "You said your mother said you want to do animation, and I can introduce you to somebody. I know some people at Disney." I thought, really? So when I was 18, they drove me down. We drove down to Los Angeles to Disney Studios, and I met with somebody there with with letters from Hank Ketchum, Eldon Dedini, Gus Arriola. Introduction. They had all worked at Disney Studios before the war, during the war, after. They all had gone to Art Center College, and so they knew everybody. And so I just showed people this letter, and I said, "Well, I'm living at one thing. I did work for a comic, did ghost a comic strip called for Frank O'Neill called Short Ribs that was published in the newspapers, and so it's kind of what I wanted to do." and so eventually, by going to Disney, they said, "Well, we don't have any room in the animation department, but since you know how to do comics, why don't you, you can either do Donald Duck comic books or Disney comic strips." And I wanted to do Donald Duck comic books. And I started doing that. And then the department head, God, I wish I remember his name. He really, this guy changed my life. He said, I know you want to do animation. So the city of Hollywood, the Chamber of Commerce is going to, they're sponsoring a class that out of 1,000 contestants, I guess, they're going to pick 8. And so I had these letters from all these guys and Disney. And I said, it was really weird. They didn't know what I did at Disney, but I called this number and said, "Hi, I work at Walt Disney. I'd like to be in your class." So I get picked. And Irv Spence, animator was Irv Spence, who did Tom and Jerry cartoons forever. He was giving the class. And so I didn't know anything about flipping cells or drawing. I'd never really seen an animation disc or a table, but I sat down and I watched the other guys and what they were doing. And then I started animating one of my cartoon characters, my characters, not anything else. And Herb said, "Hey, I like your stuff. Well, you want to work with me?" And I said, "Sure. Where are you working?" He goes, he's at Chuck Jones, and they're doing Horton Hears a Who. So I ended up getting a job at Chuck Jones. It was at Sunset and Vine Towers. And that's how I got into animation.
Oh, wow. That is honestly absolutely amazing. The way you've kind of gone through that, it's like kind of every step I like recognized a name, because of course these are like, I guess the people that have been cemented from almost like the first era of animation. And so it's absolutely amazing to hear how you kind of like learned from them and all the stuff that you started to develop at that kind of early stage in your career. But is there anything that you learned, kind of in those classes? Like, was there a particular person that taught you, or even a show that you studied as a part of that you feel had the biggest impact on you?
I have to say, I got to get this in. While I was there, when I first got to Hollywood, I became an assistant to one guy who was doing commercials, John Freeman. And he'd worked at Disney. I met all these Disney guys. So I had this sort of rhythm and theme and style, thick, thin lines from the Disney animators. And he called me one day and he said, "I'm working this place that does commercials, Cascade Pictures, and they do the Pillsbury Doughboy." I'm like 19 and 20. I mean, I'm like just I'm absorbing anything that anybody will tell me. And he goes, and there's one guy that's working in the camera department, Max Morgan. He ran the Disney multiplane camera, but he's working here now. And then upstairs is Tex Avery. The Tex Avery, you mean like from those early, weird cartoons with the eyes pop out and all that stuff? I said, "Yeah, he's up there. He's doing Frito Bandito." was directing these commercials, animated commercials. And so, oddly enough, I became friends with him. Although I was an in-betweener, assistant animator, I just became friends with Tex Avery. And he taught me, he goes, what's the quickest way to get a character across the screen? I went, how many frames? I went, I don't know. And he said, 1. He said, you start with a guy with in a pose, and you stretch that one character all the way across the frame. And then you do a little, on the other side, it does you zip out, and that one frame is a character, and he's on the other side of the frame, and he wiggles. Just timing things, 2-3 frames, what you can get away with. He would just talk this stuff all the time. and I never forgot that, because when I eventually got into visual effects is animation and timing by the frame, movement by the frame, blurs, how long, physics, the weight of something. What is anyway, that's what I learned from that.
Well, there's some amazing stories. It's so interesting to hear some of the process and the work behind it. You've been involved in some legendary movies, such as being the visual effects art director of the original Ghostbusters movie. What was this like, and what were some of the key moments in working on that film?
That guy. How do I get it? I printed out some things because I didn't know how to show this, but I did a film, Heavy Metal, animated. I did the Tarna sequence. Moved to Montreal, and Ivan Reitman was the producer of Tarna. Well, not Tarna, of the movie Heavy Metal, which was a lot of multiple stories, all based on French comic books, and I became friends with French illustrator Jean Giraud. Name was Mobius, and we wanted to do the main sequence, which I guess they couldn't get the rights to do Arzak, so that story became Tarna, a woman warrior, which I did. That was 30 minutes. That was the main sequence in the movie, the end of the movie. So Ivan was, I talked to Ivan a lot. So Ivan then went into, one day, I showed this reel from Tarna before it was filmed, before it was released, to George Lucas and his wife, Marcia, who were, Richard Edlund was, I had called Richard Edlund, and they were finishing Raiders of the Lost Ark. And he said, we need somebody to set up the animation department at ILM to do Ghosts for Poltergeist. So he goes, so why don't you bring a reel? You got a reel, we'll run the reel here. So I ran the reel at MGM while they were finishing Raiders of the Lost Ark, and in walks Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. And I thought, man, I do not belong here. These are real filmmakers. I'm just an animation guy. And I was really embarrassed. I was really nervous, but I showed the reel. And then Richard said, yeah, great. When can you start? So I moved up to San Francisco to ILM to do Poltergeist. So they needed me to do ghost ectoplasm. And could I come up with a way to animate it? Which I did. So I'm jumping ahead, but
oh wow,
Ghostbusters. This is what I did on Ghostbusters. You can show it. I think I'm here.
Oh my gosh.
But that was after Poltergeist. So for Poltergeist, I had Steven Spielberg came up and he was talking about, there was some stuff on the stairs initially, which were, initially they were kind of blobs. And so I did these drawings of these blobs that were coming down the stairs. They had already shot plates, and they sort of moved. It was supposed to be ectoplasm. They had moved through. I'm gonna see if I can do this. Moved through the room. These are my drawings from back then. And then I said to Stephen, I went, Stephen, you don't have any ghosts in this movie. I mean, there's a great film called Uninvited. And he goes, yeah, the ghost on the stairs. I went, yeah. He goes, but we have ghosts. We've got, we have meat that moves across the counter, and we've got a tree comes to life and grabs the kid. And I said, yeah, but you don't have this classic Victorian English style ghost, And he went, yeah, you're right. We don't. So come up, show me something. So I set about doing the ghost.
Wow.
This is the ghost from Poltergeist. This is what I sent Steven Spielberg. And then that ghost on the stairs. And the next thing, is like, okay, shoot it. And so, here's a day we're shooting on stage, how to make that ghost look like that. All of us. I hope this is okay. Flat.
Oh yeah,
and
it's absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
And I had here's Stephen's. I had a pencil drawing, and he drew. Said, "I want little ectoplasmic lights and little arms coming off the ghost, and I want to move the flowers and move the lamps and do stuff like that." So that's what got me basically going in live action. I did that, and then in that same movie, there's a hand that comes out of the television screen and turns into ectoplasm and smoke, animated smoke that moves around. So I kind of did all that, and then so Richard Edlund just said, we want you to stay here and help design stuff. And that's what happened. So at some point, when Richard then, while I was there on Poltergeist, Ivan Reitman called me. He goes, "Hey, how you doing?" Okay, said, "Hey, so how's it going? How's it going up there? Did we hear you're working on this ghost movie?" I went, "Yeah, Poltergeist." He goes, "You think Richard Edlund would want to do a ghost comedy?" I went, "Sure. Why don't you give him a call? Why not?" Yeah, I don't know his schedule, but I don't know if we can come up to ILM and do it. And he said, so the next thing I know is Richard comes in and goes, "Hey, this guy Ivan Reitman called me." Yeah, I said, "You've worked with him, right?" I said, "Yeah." Because he did live action film, like he did Meatballs with Dan Aykroyd. No, excuse me, with what's his name? Meatballs, and what was the other one? Stripes. Stripes was a big hit at that point. But he goes, well, he wants to do a comedy like Poltergeist, only with ghosts, only with the cast of Saturday Night Live. And I'm, oh, cool. And that's the way we looked at it. And so he went down, and basically, I guess made a deal, started this company, Boss Film. I still got the mug. And Boss Film, first film we did was Ghostbusters, Poltergeist 2 were the first two films we scheduled. And all the guys from the animation department from that I brought in from Canada to ILM, we all moved down to Boss Film and set up the animation department there. And I became, technically on Ghostbusters, I was the visual effects art director, but as the visual effects art director, the title is weird because I was really a supervisor. Well, I went on stage and I shot, directed stuff on stage, designed it and shot it. And then today that job is supervisor, but that's why I became supervisor and everything else that happened in Boss Film. Anyway, yeah, that then Ghostbusters literally changed everything. I mean, because that was such a big hit everywhere. And I even got a call one day. A letter came in the mail, and I opened it up, and it said, it was from the Art Directors Guild. It said, "Welcome, brother." And there was a bill for $4,000. Like, and I went to the storyboard guys and went, "Wait a minute, this am I an art? Can I be an art director, really?" Because that was the credit on the movie. And it's like, I go, "Yeah, you design all this stuff." Yeah, and it's better if you're an art director, you hire the storyboard guys. You can go work on a lot legally. You're going to work in any lot studio in town as a production designer or art director before they hire anybody else. They need to hire you to hire the storyboard guys, so you can hire yourself to storyboard. And that's what I did. I became a union art director. And that's when I met Jim Cameron. I went on to the lot on Fox, and I sat with Jim, and we designed The Abyss. And then I was hiring storyboard guys before we had an art director, literally, because I was the working art director. Did I get too far ahead?
Oh no, I mean, that is crazy. I mean, you may have like pre-answered Sophie's next question, but I just want to say,
sorry.
like, thank you so much for like sharing all that stuff about Ghostbusters, because genuinely, like, it's so crazy to think that it came out in the 80s, and me in like 2005 and 6, like, so many years after that initial release, was playing Ghostbusters in the playground at school. It's just so crazy what that movie did. And it's just amazing. So thank you so much for sharing. And I guess, Alycia, if you want to kind of go with your question.
So out of your whole filmography, do you have any favorite projects that you have worked on, and maybe why they stand out to you as your favorite project?
I have a few. I worked with Jim Cameron for 35 years, but Ghostbusters was the main one. That was the start of a lot. And because of Ghostbusters, I had gone to a screening. There was a screening of Alien, because Jim had done this really cool film, Terminator, and everybody talked about it. And so the follow-up film he did was Aliens. And so I had gone to a screening in Westwood and happened to sit behind Jim Cameron and Gail Hurd. They'd snuck into the theater. I probably didn't have to sneak in, but they got into the theater after everybody had come in, and sitting in front of me is Jim Cameron. I'm like, that's the guy, And oddly enough, I had been invited to Tokyo Film Festival, I think later in that same year, to talk about Poltergeist 2, which is a film I had completed. And Jim was invited to talk about Aliens. He was going to talk about that. So, and I thought, maybe I'll talk to him. Maybe I can be fun to, if I'm over there with him, just to hook up. I don't know if we can. And so when the movie was over, which was an outrageously good movie, we were standing in the hallway out front in the mezzanine, and I said, "Hi, Jim, my name's John Bruno. I did this. I've worked with Sigourney on Ghostbusters." He goes, "Oh, I know who you are." He goes, "Yeah, well, I just do. You do like the big time movies. I do the bubble gum and wire and simple, simple stuff that the best I can." I went, "Well, I'd love to. I hear you're going to Tokyo." He goes, "Yeah, let's hook up in Tokyo." And from there, we ended up just hanging out and going everywhere. We went on radio shows and talk shows, and we gave seminars on special effects and talked about movies. And we traveled to Kyoto on the bullet train. Remember that? And then when we said, when you get back, we're going to have to go, riding in the dirt bikes in the desert and just do some stuff. He liked to play racquetball, so I used to play we'd go play racquetball. This is all before working on another film. And after like a few months of this, I got a call from Gail saying, hey, Jim's having a birthday party. We're just inviting his friends. I went, oh. I thought, I guess I'm his friend. So showed up at that and met all these people. It was really cool. And then he said, I'm going to work on the next film I'm doing is this underwater adventure, The Abyss. I need like 4 or 5 paintings to present it. And, can you help me get people together? So I guess Phil Norwood storyboards, and Michelle Moen did some paintings, oil paintings, actually. And we started doing drawings, and it sort of continued, and suddenly this was a film. And nobody had any idea how to do any of it, especially the water tentacle, we call the water pseudopod. And so for me, talking about which of the films I remember, it's The Abyss, Ghostbusters, Terminator 2, working with Arnold and Jim. True Lies, I was actually a janitor in True Lies. The jet crashes into the building, I'm vacuuming. But we did, we landed Harriers on the bridge in the Florida Keys for real. That was an exciting movie. And then I eventually got to co-direct Terminator 2 3D for Universal Studios, which is 10-minute all-out battle, future war. And then Titanic, we actually dove the Titanic to film parts of the movie. So I made 4 dives on the ship. I'm now a member of the Explorers Club, which is a great honor. And I directed his dive on the Mariana Trench as a documentary. So I don't know. You tell me when to stop.
Oh gosh, I don't think I've got it in me. Like, I've done quite a lot of these calls, and I'm actually like shocked at myself that I'm just doing all I can to not get completely starstruck and just start freaking out over some of the amazing stuff that you've been involved in. It is truly an honor to just hear all this stuff. And obviously you've done a lot of really, really cool and iconic things, in the past as well, but recently you've also, continued to do such amazing work as well. And one of your more recent projects that I really loved and I was keeping up with for a while was Nosferatu, admittedly because of the Joe Hill, Stephen King connection. And I've got like a whole shelf of Stephen King's there. But it's just, oh my gosh. That's actually crazy. That is amazing.
Yeah. This guy walks up to me when we were doing Nosferatu and says, and I looked at him and I went, it's Stephen King. As I remember Stephen King, it says, this is Joe Hill, Stephen King's son, who wrote Nosferatu. Looks just like Stephen King, as I remember Stephen King, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. And yeah, and that was fun because that was something I was asked to do. And I thought, I liked the story. I decided to do it. We did it in, where was that? In Providence, Rhode Island. And the sort of mystery stuff and the sort of spooky things about it was that it was this car that was evil, and the car itself, 1939 Rolls-Royce Wraith, was evil, and the guy who was who was driving the car, he was the chauffeur, was affected by the car, and if he could get young children to get in the back seat, they would age and he would remain younger. That's pretty spooky. And there's a lot of interesting characters around, that people that had powers that they didn't know they had. And Ashley was a character who could find things, but she could find things if she drove across one of these wooden bridges that exists in the East Coast and Connecticut, and other people like what's her name? Look, the bag.
Oh wow!
Reach into the bag and pull out things that would spell the answer, and you have to figure out what it meant. Like, this is the answer, Wraith. What does it mean? I don't know. And so I had to figure out how to make all this stuff look photoreal. This is my favorite: scissors for the drifter. Ooh, they're rubber. But there are all these kind of cool things that was in this story, especially the motorcycle. She had a dirt bike that she would travel across the bridge, and that's what this picture was of. We had a section of the bridge. We had a full-size bridge, and then this section, it's 15 feet deep, long, full-size, that we'd move around to different parts of the towns that we would film in near Providence, and so we had to figure out ways of her to drive into this thing and then drive out. It was stunts, and that's how she got to location. She could go to Colorado. Like, the answer to her quest was in Colorado. She'd leave in the town she was in, and the other end of the bridge was Colorado. And we sort of, I brought everything I knew how to do to make that work. I thought season 1 was really good, especially Christmas Land was fun. The big thing was Christmas Land, and that's where Joe Hill came up to me one day, and he goes, "Hey, I'm a fan of yours." I went, "You are?" He goes, "Yeah, because of Poltergeist." I went, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, the static, that's what's outside the bridge is static. What's at the other end of the bridge until you get there is static." So I knew kind of, okay, I know the look. And I got along really well with him. I'd love to do something else with him. It'd be fun.
Yeah, that is crazy.
But
I never realized how similar he did look to Stephen King, because I've collected most of the early first editions by now, and you only need to look to the back of one of the work in the 80s, like Cujo, and that could almost be like his author profile for around about that time. That's crazy. I never realized.
Well, I did say one day, I went, "Man, you're so lucky. You get to ask if you have any questions or story points. If you want somebody to review your work, you can ask Stephen King. That's unfair." But part of now, to bring what I do to Nosferatu, I brought this again.
Oh wow!
There's a character that becomes, at one point, the car breaks down, and he's 35, and he gets older and older and older, down so he's 135. So we had to figure out a way, what's the simplest way to show all that? And I did it in an action scene where he's in front of his car, and then he starts to contort and change and become an old man. And with this beautiful makeup by Joel Harlow, Academy Award-winning makeup artist, he made 4 or 5 different poses or different makeups. And the actor basically was so good. He went into and he would hit these poses, and we had this rhythm. It all worked it out that he's going to start this. He's going to look at his hands, and you're going to see his hands age, and then he's going to hunch over, and then he's going to sit down, and then he's going to turn to the right, and he's going to do it at the same time 4 times, but different makeup. And then we put all that together so that we could digitally blend all that stuff together and have that work. That was why that movie was so fun. We had really good crew.
It just sounds amazing. And I guess like a bit of a
Jamie O'Brien, of
curiosity-
course, the producer, key writer, showrunner. Jamie she let me do that crap. They had to not do so much on the second season. I said, you blow all our cookies on the first one. The second one, we have to back off a bit. I went, well, the first one is a good show. First season.
Yeah. It's just incredible. And I guess I kind of have to ask, from like a visual effects standpoint, is there any difference within your methodology when it comes to adapting, I guess, something with like a pre-established fandom versus, I guess, kind of coming at things with an original take on, say, what something may look like without that kind of descriptive source material?
Well, generally, because later in I started directing. I directed Star Trek Voyager, and the one thing I used to get from people was do less.
Oh.
But I don't know how to do that. I mean, let me just do what I do, and they'll just say, well, and I had Ron Moore, who was a visual effects guy, would let me do certain things, but yeah, I had to learn again, like, don't do so much. Try to do things in one. I learned how to do oneers, which is good, and I incorporated that in visual effects. That's why that shot was a oneer. You watched it all happen. It simplified a lot, but it was still complex to do. But you try to keep things, in some cases, like maybe we can see things in shadow. If you start on somebody and you pan off on a wall and you see the change in the shadow, it's the kind of stuff that happens in television. But in recent years, television has got, because of, like Game of Thrones, they spent some money on, I think they were spending $20 million a show, where other shows were, 9, 10. This is your budget, and then if you're not, and you got $1 million per show to figure out what you're going to do instead of whatever you want to do. You just have to think it through. You have to do less, and so make it important. When you do it, make it work.
So it's very, very amazing to actually listen to all the stories and the history of where you started to what you have done now in the present date. I'm gonna jump back into the past. So in 1977, you worked on Scooby Doo's Laff-A-Lympics as a layout artist and a story director. During your time as a layout artist, at what stage in the show's production would you typically be hired on?
Once the storyboards, once the scripts were turned in and the storyboards were done for the scripts, they'd hire a layout director. So you would take, since I happen to have that thing again, I'll bring this up again. You would take this and put it into a 12 field format, 12 field being 12 inches wide. And so this is a TV frame here. And so you would make a background that was 2.5 times longer. And you have overlays, underlays, and if there's a boat coming through here, I think there is, that's the element that's in the middle. So you had to take those things and take those elements and break them apart and then in the middle, of course, would be the characters, and you'd have to separate them out and do animation poses, like start and stop, the simplest way possible. When I got there, Iwo Takamoto was looking for, so do you want to take some, want to try to do some designs, like character designs, cars, boats, things like that. And he would, and so I started working with Iwo. He was the guy. And it was really funny because I still rough things out. I would rough out a boat, I would rough out a car, rough out character costumes. And while he was talking to you, he would take your drawing and never look away and just sort of redraw it, clean it up, and then give it back. And then I would go, okay, I know what to do. And then I would just turn it in. So, and then one day, it was Don Jurwitz liked my layouts. And because what I found out is if I could work longer, because it was seasonal animation in Saturday morning TV land. Seasonal is you couldn't work as an animator until the layouts were done. And then I thought, if I could do storyboards, I could start sooner, do storyboards. And then when the storyboards were done, I could pick up the layouts and layout shows, and then pick up animation. And then at the end of the animation cycle, pick up I can become an assistant animator. And I could work for 6 months. And this was my evil plan. And so Don Jurwitz one day, I had asked him if I could storyboard one of his shows, and he was doing Laff-A-Lympics. And for free, I would just go home and do it. And he thought, I came back and he thought it was pretty good. He said, what, I'll pay you for that. Why don't you do another one? And that's kind of it. I just took scripts. I wasn't involved in how the characters, I'm trying to remember which ones I did. I can only remember some of it. I never did a Scrappy Doo. I know that's one of your questions, because that was later. But I did do all of these characters, and then it was hard. I mean, I had to go to get model sheets for every character that Hanna-Barbera had. And what I then decided to do was I would go take previous storyboards that were printed in this big pile, and I would, all the good poses I would cut out and paint and glue onto my panels, so I could like move ahead, because there were so many characters drawn, 6 in a panel, 7 in a panel. And all I had to do was get the story right, the images right, and the cuts right, and those were written in the script. And I had a friend who was a writer, and he told me little things to do. What was his name? I'm looking for him. He was the one of the key writers, more than Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, who eventually opened their own company. They're the ones that created Laff-A-Lympics. But and Margaret Lesh was also a woman who I used to go in her office and ask her questions about, what's the most important thing in these stories? And she would say, well, this particular one, make sure this happens, and these, the most beloved characters, make sure you do good drawings of those. That's kind of how I worked it. But, and then at one point, Jane Barbera, who was the head of production, she goes, hey, your drawings are pretty good. Why don't you just do an entire show? Like, you're in charge of lay out the whole thing, hire whoever you need. And one of the, turns out that, so one of the people that I hired was a guy named Dave Stevens. And Dave Stevens eventually did The Rocketeer. So I had all this group, and that was what I would do. In 1 week, I would lay out an entire show for them, and they liked it. And then that's when I got hired to do heavy metal. So I left, and I took some of the people with me.
That's perfect. And like, I know you mentioned the Flintstones earlier on, and of course, like the Laff-A-Lympics is very, you know, fun in the fact that it brought in just so many different Hanna-Barbera characters together, like Huckleberry Hound, Yogi. Like, were there any characters that you were all like particularly excited to kind of work with?
Well, I have to say, I have one side story. I got a call one day from Bill Hanna. And I went into his office, and he goes, I need a storyboard back here. It's Friday. So on Monday morning, this is a Captain Caveman. Captain Caveman. I said, yeah. I'll pay you $1,000 if you have this back here on Monday morning. And it was Friday at 4:00. Since I was in my 20s, I went, I'll stay up all weekend and do that. And I did. And that's when I turned that in. And that's when Jane Barbera called me and said, hey, that turned out pretty good. You know, why don't you become your own, you know, set up your own layout department. But all the characters, they were, I did sit in a recording session one day. I just remember, and all those Gary Owens, I remember from Laugh. Well, it was the thing called Laughing. Gary Owens would come in and like, here's all these famous people, voices that I know. June Foray, who was Rocky and Bullwinkle. They would come in and just do different characters all day long. You know, it's like, this is amazing because I had access to that. But you know, and I'm really surprised because at the time, nobody, we didn't get credit for any of the shows. This is something that came in much later. I guess when they released them overseas, they actually, you see the credits of who did what. And I went, oh, I guess I did that. Yeah. I don't know that I got, they put my name on everything. I don't know they did every single one of those. I can't. Because I did, when I was doing my layouts, I did Super Friends. That was one. Super Friends was really hard because of all of the Marvel character or the DC characters. And then so it was Super Friends. I did a Godzilla was a show for a while, and that's where Dave Stevens is really good because you had to really know how to draw monsters and do wreckage. You had to wreck everything. But that was the main thing I remember.
Wow, I couldn't imagine sitting in on a cast recording during that era because I think a lot of people, maybe kind of bit of it's nostalgia, maybe it's just that kind of iconic era, but that's considered like the golden era of, you know, voice acting. Like you've mentioned June Foray, and you've also had like Dawes Butler, Don Messick, just so many iconic
Messick, I remember
voices.
him.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is just absolutely amazing. And again, like you say, with the Laff-A-Lympics, it must have been so interesting to kind of work around that series because every episode it was in a new location. You know, 1 second they were in Brazil and then London. But generally speaking, in terms of what you've done in terms of layout art or storyboard, is there a location that you've had to draw that's kind of stuck with you as being one that's been particularly memorable?
Trying to remember, one of those went to Japan, I think, right?
Yeah.
I remember Japan having to do Japan was interesting. I liked that one. There was another one in Africa, and it was really hard way to draw animals. I mean, they started in one place and they ended up think one ended up in Paris. But I can't remember which one started which and which ended where. But I wish I could say I remember showing up in London, but I'm sorry I don't.
No, it was kind of like a quick sequence. I think it was just Shaggy like scaling up Big Ben. So
I don't remember that. It
Mm.
probably wasn't me. So
I'm going to do my one because it's about Scrappy.
Yeah, so I was a bit curious to know because you are credited as working on the Scooby Doo and Scrappy Doo show. So
Right.
was that not something that you remember working on, or was that?
I just don't remember because that came in towards the end, 78, 79.
Yeah.
And I looked up the dates, and I know it was Margaret Lesh, and I know going into her office a lot, talking about things, and but that's also the time we left to do heavy metal, so there's an overlap of blur. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't, and I know that it was probably. I remember Scrappy Doo. I remember it because I was laughing. It's like, oh yeah, you're bringing the kid in. I just don't remember if I worked on it.
No, see, that is a curious, and again, like I don't blame you at all. It's like kind of mind blowing that I think, in terms of myself, if someone would to ask me a question about something I'd done last week, the chances of me getting that accurate or correct is, I don't know, 50-50. And so, like, going back this far, that's completely understandable. And I guess to that end, we'll go to, I guess, the future section, I guess the final section, to kind of start to wrap things up a bit. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Do you have any upcoming projects that you're able to share with us today, please?
Yes. Where is it? I just completed this. This is a Dark Horse Comic Navigator graphic novel. I mean, this is done by illustrated by Jordi Armengol, and he's in Barcelona. Great artist. That's why I look so European. And this is, and I'm gonna pitch it, is available for pre-order on Amazon right now. It comes out in January. And we're going to try to we're trying to place this as a feature film, of course. And what else? And then I have this, which you should like. Just before I started heavy metal years ago, I worked on a project in Montreal called Scass the Mouse, written by Donald Pleasance, the British actor. Was recorded with Ringo Starr as the voice of this character, Scass the Mouse, and we are now bringing it back. And I'm with, and I'm sorry to say that my partner on this, Gerald Potterton, just passed away 2 weeks ago, just shy of us getting it out. But we're going around studios. I guarantee this will be an animated feature. And because we have Ringo said, yeah, I'll do it. And if we need any additional music or songs or voices, he's available. Although he's on tour right now, hard to believe. And something that just came up a week ago, which we're having meetings on this coming weekend, is a film called, it's a British film about the SAS, me as a director, in Afghanistan, a beginning of 3 weeks after 9/11. It's written by Hugh Daly. He was a British SAS officer and had been in Afghanistan, and it's just it's based on a true story. So I think we're going to shoot it in Greece and Spain, and that we start our meetings here in LA this weekend. So that'll be a feature film. It's called, it means probably more to you at the moment, the working title, Hooligans. And I was told that Hooligans is a sort of a nickname for the SAS soldiers, British soldiers that were in Afghanistan. So it's the British take on this whole thing, different than ours. So, and I'm looking forward to doing this. Should be, I could go back to blowing things up. It'd be fun.
Oh gosh, that is wonderful. I'll be sure to leave like the pre-order links for the Navigator in the show notes. I kind of have to ask for like my own personal like my just personal curiosity. Like just being sat here with you today, you yourself are a legend that has worked on so many legendary things with so many other legendary people. I have to ask, have you ever considered, or have you ever already considered like writing a book of memoirs? Because that would just be so interesting to hear all of that.
Yeah, you're like the fourth person that said that this week, because we're going over all this stuff. Oh, because I have to add one thing that I left down.
Oh.
This is important. When was this? 1979, 1980. When I first got down here, I had done after I finished heavy metal, I used to, because I kept saying, so I could work for 6 months in the animation industry, because that was it was seasonal, and then I ended up, I had a cousin who was a makeup artist. I would go to work with him just to see. I was trying to be a makeup guy, to learn makeup effects, and I liked all the stuff that was done, like Planet of the Apes. I mean, I want to work with that guy. So he worked for John Chambers, and he goes, he introduced me to John Chambers, and John Chambers and I became really good friends who did Planet of the Apes. And I would go to his shop on the weekends, which was in his garage. Unless you were the union, you couldn't go on the lot and work with him or hang out. So he had set up a garage studio. And so this is 1973. That's me. You can note.
Oh yeah, you can see like the
bell bottoms. Look at that. I wish I had those. And this is his father, who's 100. That's why this picture was taken. And this is the island, Dr. Moreau. I helped him box this stuff up, but he would make that in his garage, and so I would hang out on the weekends. Always, he would call me, and then sometimes he'd say, "Hey, can you design some things for me? I'll pay you $100." I'm like, yeah. So So I worked on Beneath the Planet of the Apes, designing what the makeup might look like, and then a couple other films for him. And then one day he got a star on Hollywood Boulevard. So this was at the time of Argo, the movie Argo. I mean, the non-movie Argo. This is 1980. He says, "Hey, I got this film I'm going to produce, and I need somebody in the office to do drawings. So I'll just pay you cash. You don't have to tell anybody." So it was at the Gower Street Studios on Sunset and Gower, and I went in there and I would sit in the day and I'd draw characters from. He said it was called Argo was the ship of Jason and the Argonauts. So they had scouts out in the desert looking for locations, and we're waiting to hear if they can find all the stuff and it's doable to go to the desert because of this hostage thing that's going on. Then it'll happen, but it might not happen. But meanwhile, I need you here to draw, and then if I'm not in the office, answer the phone and make sure you answer whatever the name was, Studio 6 Productions. Because there were 6 I know now, 6 hostages. And there was one other person whose wife was there to answer the phone, but I would, always remember to answer the phone. So one day, John did come in and say, "Hey, they're back. Everybody's back. The film's canceled." But before that, a guy walks in the middle of this. I was there for a couple of weeks. He walks in, and he's got a briefcase. He goes over to the table next to me. He opens the briefcase. It's full of $100 bills. He takes a stack out, and he goes, "How long have you worked here?" I went, "A couple of weeks." And he counts out 4 $100 bills, which is more money than anybody ever paid me to draw at the time, 1980. And then he's paying people. And then I looked at John, and he just said, "Don't worry about it. It's okay." Anyway, he takes off. And that was that. The job completed. Is everybody's coming back. You don't have to worry about it. And 32 years later, I was in a theater here in Pasadena, and a movie comes on. A trailer comes on that said Argo, about makeup artist John Chambers. And I looked at that and went, "What the hell?" I didn't know. I absolutely did not know. It was just another job. And here I look more like Ben Affleck than Ben Affleck. But that was the look and the beard and the hair and brown jacket. It's an absolutely true story. And I never knew.
Oh gosh, that is amazing. Like truly, truly amazing. And the fact that and again, further, I need to just say thank you for preparing all of this stuff to show us today, because it just means so much to have you here. And I do appreciate that we've taken up quite a lot of your time today. So I guess my kind of final question would be: is there like an ideal place to kind of keep up with your work or anything like that?
Well, no. Right now, I'm not only am I doing Navigator's coming out shortly. I have another one I'm working on. I don't want to tell anybody. Another with Dark Horse Comics, and basically, Scouse the Mouse. We're going to push hard on that, but that might be done. Hopefully, we'll do it in Montreal, which is the original where it started. But there's the big animation companies there. I have talked to Frame Store in London about it. But yeah, Scouse the Mouse, Hooligans, if it happens, it happened really quick. I'll be leaving here within a month, because that'll be prepped in Europe. And look for that.
Yeah, that is brilliant. We'll definitely be sure to do so. And once again, thank you so much for your time today. It means a lot to have you here. And again, the preparation, just the legendary stories that we've heard. It's been an absolute honor. So thank you so much. And thank you so much to Alycia and Sophie for joining me today, because it's just always great to be able to do this with friends as well. So just to share this whole experience, it's just been absolutely magical. They both run amazing pages on Instagram that I'll link in the description down below, and of course YouTube. And thank you again. There's a lot of thanks at the end of these for everyone watching this, because we've done quite a few episodes by now, and to have so many people that are continually commenting, the same people, the same faces as well, and the kind of growing numbers. It's just been an absolute pleasure to be on this journey with everyone. So if you do want to see more, then please like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.